waterfowl down there?
Duck, geese, mostly duck and geese.
Anything other than birds?
We have all kinds of wildlife area, and everything to fish, true.
What makes this particular piece of land worth protecting in your opinion?
That you can do like adopt the goose program, where a family would take in and adopt geese that have been rehabilitated from, say, Salmon or Nature Park. And in the wintertime, they would take care of the geese, and all their young would go back into the wild. Now, and tree swallows, that's another project. Tower platforms for osprey. Like a lot of people, they hear of ospreys, but they never ever get to view them, right? So it's a place you can go and view osprey. We'll have pole boxes for little brown bats, and along the shorelines of the ponds, we can plant native plants to enhance the shoreline for waterfowl. Also planting of waterfowl forage crops in agricultural fields nearby, just through the local farmers. And plus now to gain the wetland stewardship.
Well, when will you know if your plan will get the go-ahead?
I figure in the next month.
That soon?
Yep.
Association. Jameson says he's glad to hear Tourism Minister Sandra Kelly discussing controls on gravel pit camping. He hopes the government has
another $1 billion into fisheries relief programs on the east and west coasts. $730 million goes to the east coast. Now, with reaction to this morning's announcement, we're joined in St. John's by two guests. Lawrence Kiley is from Maddox Cove, Newfoundland. He's been fishing for more than 30 years. He's been on tags since 1992. Good morning to you.
Morning.
And Gerald Holden on the right of the screen is from St. John's. He spent 30 years working in fish plants, and he was cut off tags last month. Good morning to you, Mr. Holden.
Good morning.
All right, Mr. Kiley, 56 years old, 30 years as a fisherman. Is there something in this program today that will get you out of the fishery?
Very little in this for me. You know, there's a lot of interest in license buyout, but there's an awful lot of questions that have to be answered.
Like what, for example?
For example, is this tax-free? This license buyout, is it debt-free? Because most of the licenses that they're going to buy out, most of them have they're in debt to the Fisheries Loan Board, and they have a heavy debt load. And if there's taxes to be taken off, you know, you're going to end up with absolutely nothing.
Sure. So your own situation is that you're carrying some debt with your boat and your gear. Is that right?
The kind of debt that I'm involved in is that I bought a new boat in June '92. And the fishery closed down in July of '92, so that left me with a debt load of $50,000. Now, I do the best I can with the interest. I pay some of the interest on it every year, but the Fisheries Loan Board is in a complete mess. There's no reorganization of the Fisheries Loan Board. There's absolutely nothing, you know. But they don't put that much pressure on you. You know, well, you can't, you know, there's almost impossible to get any money out of, you know, when you got no resource to make the money.
So basically you need a certain amount of money or it doesn't make sense to you.
That's right. You know, I'm 56-year-old. Where am I going? You know, it's almost impossible. It's very, very disappointing in this announcement this morning. You know, there's really, really disappointing. They haven't put the money in to the fishery to restructure it. You know, if they're going to do the job, you know, you better do it right, because this is the last kick at the can, and if we don't do this right, you know, we're going to be forever in a mess here in this province.
Mr. Holden, you have worked in a fish plant for over 30 years of your life, and you're 56 now. Does this program do anything to help you?
Well, I don't know. I was going to ask Mr. Mifflin the question. I quit school in 1956 and went to work in a fish plant. I worked till 1991. I put 30 years in the fish plant, and I worked 12 months of the year. It wasn't that seasonal plants. The two plants I worked in, they worked 12 months of the year. Now I'm 56, and I got cut off tags on the 9th of May. Am I qualified for this early retirement? Surely God, someone 30 years in the industry and 56 years old, I suppose that's what they designed this program for. I don't know. I never got the chance to ask the man the question. And when the plant closed in '91, I went back to school for 5 years. I never stayed home. I went to school for 5 years. I didn't know how to read or write. When I went to school, they learnt me the alphabet, and I came out with a level 2. That's something they can't take from me, whether I get tags or no. I can pick up a book and read it. And I would say there's a couple of hundred more people in my range hood at 56 now, got cut off in May, and where did they go? Spend their lifetime in the fishery. Surely this is what this was put forward to, for the long-term people that put the years into it. Not because you put 6 or 7 years into it and you haven't hit the age and you're on until August, you'll get a pension. But if I put 30 years into it and I'm going to come out with nothing, where's the justice in this?
So as it appears to you this morning, do you think you qualify, or you're just not sure at all?
I'm not sure. I never got a chance to ask the man the question. He left the building.
How do you feel about that, the fact that they left the building?
Well, I think they should have stayed around and waited till the crowd quieted down and asked some questions. A lot of people came off in May that got 15 and 20 years into the fishery, and they're all up there. They don't know what's there for them. They could be helped to the wolves, the same as myself at 56 years old. Where do you go? After putting 30 years into it.
Mr. Kiley, the rest of Canada watching this may say, look, there's been billions of dollars poured into this problem, and much of that went to Newfoundland. Why do you need more at this time?
I don't think that the rest of Canada realizes what happened in this province. You know, I don't think some of the Newfoundland people, there's an awful lot of politicians don't realize what happened. This is a destruction of a resource. When we came into Confederation building, when we came into Confederation, we had a cod stock that's one of the largest in the world. After 50 years of Confederation, this is what it boils down to. Nothing. You know, it's very, very disappointing, very, very sad. I think every Canadian, every Newfoundlander should have to hang their head in shame, you know, to let this happen.
What's going to happen in Newfoundland in the weeks to come as people absorb the news and find out whether they qualify for this program?
Well, there's not much. There's going to be some demonstrations, but there's not much. You know, politicians have it in their hands. If they don't look after the rest of, if they don't look after the eastern provinces, you know, there's going to be devastation. There's going to be, you know, chaos. There's an awful lot of people going to end up on social services, and which this province can't afford 20,000 people on social services. I mean, that's just you know, that's impossible. And that 20,000 people, fishermen and plant workers, I mean, they have families, and you know, that boils down to 80 or 90, 100,000 people on social services. I mean, that's ridiculous in a country that you know, that's supposed to be rich. God help us.
Mr. Kiley and Mr. Holden, thank you very much. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been 4 years since the original tags program took effect. It all started with the closure of the cod fishery, a move that crippled an entire industry and put a way of life on hold. We'll be right back.
I'm not abusing you. I didn't abuse you.
I didn't take the fish from the goddamn water.
But who took it? You and your goddamn
Place I don't frighten. I've decided that effective at midnight tonight, there will be a moratorium on harvesting of northern cod until the spring of 1994.
We were out trying to make a living. We were out in the water trying to make a living. Whether it be bad or be poor, be good or whatever. And it was taken away from us, and now we have nothing to live on. That's the penny.
That is pretty damn foolish. There's somebody not keeping very good track of things.
Deep down in my gut today, there's a knock and a tear in my eye to look out, like I said, where I once belonged, and don't belong there anymore, because my future's took away from me.
Yep, see you.
Take care. Take care. Okay?
I think we'll talk to you.
Veterans Affairs Minister Fred Mifflin is Newfoundland's representative in the federal cabinet. He is in St. John's this morning for more on this announcement of aid to fishery workers in Newfoundland. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Normally.
Mr. Mifflin, our last guest was quite disappointed that he didn't get to ask you whether he would qualify for new assistance. He went off tags in May. Is he one of the people who's out of luck today?
There's something in this program of $750 million for everybody. I answered the question to some of the fishermen that had difficulties with the press conference, and I think the message I gave them is that there's something in this package for everybody.
Well, is
and
there
the purpose
early
of the
retirement?
There's early retirement. There's,
for anybody who went off in May?
Well, the details are going to be worked out with the union and with the province, and I think that's the message that came out from, I believe, Mr. Pettigrew. Mr. Anderson made that announcement. But there are 5 elements of the program. I think the restructuring and the license buyback, we've done that before, so I think fishermen know the answer to that. With respect to the early retirement, the details of that will be worked out, but we've done that before. In fact, we still have a program ongoing, so it will be similar to that. And with respect to the economic development, we've had programs like that before, but we have an additional $135 million, which cover adjustment packages for those exhaustees who have been off tags for many years.
Okay, one of our guests had $50,000 in debt and wonders if you're going to give him a buyout generous enough to clear off his debt so he can move on with his life. Is there that much money in this plan?
Well, it depends on what aspect, and it depends on the duration and the attachment to the fishery, and indeed on the license buyback. I can't give you figures on that because, you know, it has to be done by reverse auction. But the purpose of the program is to allow people to get on with their lives. It's not a tags program. In fact, it's different from tags. The assumptions are different. The assumption in tags is that we'd pay people passively not to work, and at the end of the time we were hoping that the fish would come back. Well, that hasn't worked. So we've got a different assumption. The assumption we're making now are 2, really. The first one is that what if the fish doesn't come back? And secondly, we have to design a program to let people get on with their lives, and that's exactly what we've done.
Part of getting on with your lives is to leave Newfoundland. You're offering relocation grants of $5,000. I mean, are you hoping that areas of Newfoundland depopulate?
Not at all. What we are looking at is to allow people to get on with their lives, and some of them will want to move on. Some of them have already moved on, but let me tell you that I believe there will be less moving on than if we hadn't had the $235 million program to allow people to stay in their communities and to work.
Now, the ministers David Anderson and Pierre Pettigrew left the room during, obviously, a lot of anger from fishermen. We saw that on our news conference earlier. Why wouldn't they stay and answer the questions to these serious decisions that fishermen now have to make?
But I want to make 2 points on that. First of all, I've stayed here to answer questions on their behalf. And I've done that because they had to leave. I made it very clear. Dr. May, the moderator, made it very clear that these 2 ministers, my colleagues, who've worked very hard with me on this program, along with all my colleagues in the federal cabinet, they have to get aboard a plane and go out to Vancouver and make an announcement, a similar announcement out there. And then Mr. Anderson has to go on to Olympia to discuss with the Americans the Alaska and the program with respect to salmon and the salmon plan. I mean, it's a long, hard day for them. They said at the beginning they had an hour here, and if people wanted to use the hour to protest and to disrupt, that was their choice.
Are you proud of this package?
I am very proud of this package. Look, let me give you the facts on this. When I started this program as the regional minister for Newfoundland 8 months ago, there was $0. On the 12th of April, there was $150 million. Okay. And now there's $750 million.
And we have to leave it there. We have to leave it there. Thank you. Welcome back. This is the CBC Morning News.
Coming up, 24 hours after the crash of a small commuter plane at Mirabel Airport, investigators are still trying to figure out what went wrong. We'll hear from the head of the Transportation Safety Board in just a few minutes.
And in the news today, Ottawa will spend another $730 million to help the East Coast fishery. This was announced this morning in St. John's, Newfoundland. Angry fishermen at the news conference tore up the official statement and threw it at a table where Federal Fisheries Minister David Anderson was seated. The $730 million package breaks down this way. There is $250 million to buy back fishing licenses. Another $180 million to provide lump sum payments for those who are still on the TAGS program this August. $135 million is available for retraining programs. $100 million is for economic development to create jobs outside the fishery. And there is $65 million for cost-shared programs with the province to encourage early retirement. Fisheries Minister David Anderson is leaving St. John's now. He's flying to the West Coast to make a similar announcement in Vancouver. In BC coastal communities, there is apprehension about what Anderson will say. People fear he will pronounce a death sentence on their way of life.
Is David Anderson committed to the survival of coastal communities in British Columbia? Is he committed to reinvesting in the resource in the communities or continually to downsize it, say it's a sunset industry, global market prices, El Nino, you have no future?
Anderson is expected to announce a West Coast aid package of about $400 million. Premier Glenn Clark has already said that is simply not enough money. Hundreds of Quebec truckers are blocking the main highway between Quebec and Ontario at this hour. They are stopping almost anyone from entering Quebec. It's the 401. Car traffic westbound is still moving slowly, but trucks aren't moving either way. The Ontario Provincial Police is rerouting all eastbound traffic, and it says truckers may move to close down another highway, number 2. The truckers are upset over a new...
This is CBC News World coverage of a live event.
Hello again, I'm Don Newman in Ottawa, where we are now standing by to go live to St. John's, Newfoundland, and a news conference by, and there you see him, Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Brian Tobin. Mr. Tobin responding to the federal announcement this morning of a $730 million multi-year program to get people out of the ground fishery. There were, as you may have seen if you were with us about 90 minutes ago, demonstrations in the room when that announcement was made, and now Mr. Tobin is giving his reaction to the federal program. We are
The purpose this morning is to respond with a general statement in response to the announcement this morning by the federal government of the post-tags measures for Atlantic Canada and specifically for Newfoundland and Labrador. I'll be making general comments. I'll ask my colleagues, Ministers Tulk and Minister Efford, to comment as well. And then we'll be available to answer questions from the media, from anybody else. I would simply make this comment. There are about 19,000 people in the province today, the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, who are very much directly affected by what happens with the post-tags program. And we realize as well that there are thousands of others who have exhausted earlier from the tags program who are affected by the announcement today. The only means that those individuals have of knowing what has been announced today, or having questions asked or answers given on what has been announced today, is through the television. They're sitting at home now. They're watching their TVs, they're listening to their radios. If we're not able, and I would ask the indulgence of people who are here today, if we're not able to carry on a press conference and to provide for questions and answers, and those families can't hear what has been said, they can't hear the questions being asked, and they can't hear the answers being given. So I would ask and ask in good faith for a show of goodwill and to allow the press conference to be continued to the end. And if there are others who want to ask questions or those who want meetings, we're more than willing, ready, and able to take part in those meetings. And we'll give you all the time you need. As a general comment, on behalf of the government of Newfoundland and Labrador, I want to reflect upon the fact that the program announced this morning, the measures contained in the program announced this morning for those who are currently on tags in the province, contain many of the features that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador recommended be part of the tags program, and contain as well many of the features that were focused upon by the Select Committee, the All-Party Select Committee of the House of Assembly, in its meetings in Ottawa and its representation in Ottawa regarding a post-tags response. Specifically, I want to note the presence in the program of a license retirement component in the order of $250 million for the Atlantic. Our understanding is about $187 million is the estimated value for Newfoundland and Labrador. We note as well the early retirement program at age 55. We've been asked to participate in the funding of that program to the tune of 30% of the cost of that program. I can confirm this morning that we are prepared to participate to the tune of 30% of the cost, but I want to say this morning that we have a concern that the program be arbitrarily applied, that is the early retirement program, only to those who are currently today on tags. We share with the Fishermen's Union the concern that there are those, indeed there was a gentleman a little while ago who addressed this question in talking to the media, there are those who've had some 30 years in the fishery, whose tags entitlement exhausted as recently as May, who are 55 or more years old, and who find themselves arbitrarily being told that because you happen to exhaust in May versus exhausting in August, you're not entitled to the program. As a government that's paying 30% of the cost of that measure, I was encouraged a few minutes ago to see Minister Mifflin in response to questions on this particular initiative to say that he's open to a discussion with the stakeholders and with the provincial government. This is an area that we believe needs to be addressed. We think it can be addressed in a reasonable fashion if one recognizes that you can't have an arbitrary cutoff date for one individual, perhaps who had 30 years in the fishery, exhausted in May, another individual who may have exhausted in August and may only have half the time in the fishery. There has to be a sense of equity and justice in the way the program is administered. Second concern that we have is the question of exhaustees. I think we recognize that the specific measures which have been announced today apply to those who are on tags. I think what many people were waiting to hear addressed, and what we didn't hear addressed this morning, and perhaps it wasn't addressed because the press conference ended early, I don't know, is what about measures that recognize and acknowledge those who have already exhausted from the program, in particular recent exhaustees, 2,000 in May alone. The federal government has a wide range of programs. The HRD department is a large department. The EI surplus is a significant fund. Will there be targeted training, mobility, or other labor adjustment measures focused on that group? This is a question I cannot give an answer to this morning. It is a question that we intend to raise. The question of economic development, we appreciate the federal government has provided for a component for economic development. That part of that may come from the labor adjustment package of about $235 million for the Atlantic. The measures for Newfoundland and Labrador, as best we can tell at this stage, will total about 160 or 70 million of those two components for Newfoundland and Labrador. Our concern with respect to that package of measures is that those dollars be targeted at the communities in Newfoundland and Labrador that have been most affected by the collapse of the fishery. I think it is fair to say that in the last round of economic development measures, there hasn't been a good fit between the communities that have had lost jobs and lost job opportunities and the new measures which are being applied. We have a zonal board process established in the province. The zonal boards are in place.
We apologize. We're having an audio problem from Newfoundland, but you are looking live at Newfoundland and Labrador Premier Brian Tobin. He is responding to the $730 million multi-year program announced by the federal government to pick up when the Atlantic Groundfish Strategy Program expires at the end of August. Mr. Tobin also asking people to take it easy, not to disrupt his meeting the way they disrupted the federal meeting about an hour and a half ago, so that questions can be asked and answers can be given.
From the fishery.
Now our audio seems to be back, so we are listening live from St. John's.
Minister, talk to say a few words about the question of economic development and our intention of working with the zonal board process.
Well, Premier, as you've indicated, there is in this province a group of development organizations called Regional Economic Development Boards. That's been established, and I'm pleased to see this morning at least the principle of working with those regional economic development boards, especially in the areas that are more affected maybe by the collapse of the groundfish industry than some other areas of the province. And I can specifically recall the South Coast, the Trapassi area, the Bonavista area, and the Northern Peninsula areas that are largely and more proportionally affected by the collapse of that industry and others. And the federal government has indicated, Minister Mifflin indicated this morning, as did Minister Anderson, that they are prepared to be flexible, that they are prepared to work with those communities, work at the community level with those people affected, to see that the economic diversification funds are spent in the communities that are most clearly affected. We, of course, as a province, will monitor that situation. We will keep on top of that and to try and ensure that does occur. And I think the federal government are very flexible in seeing that will occur for us. So I'm pleased with the principles that have been established here, and I'm sure the federal government will attempt to see that the people that are largely affected in those communities benefit most from that program.
I want to make a point on behalf of the province this morning, because there's a very powerful image and picture which has gone out across the province, gone out across the country, that the fishery as an industry in Newfoundland and Labrador may be misunderstood, is an industry of the past, or an industry that's finished. And the fact is that that is not correct. The ground fishery, the northern codstock-based ground fishery, is very much an industry which is in crisis. That is true. Those fishermen, their families, and those communities dependent upon that stock are in crisis and remain in crisis today. And today they face the largest challenge they faced in many years, larger even than the announcement of 1992 that the fishery was closing, because today we've had an announcement that the federal government is exiting income support for fishermen and for plant workers, and that this is the last measure that they will provide in the way of economic assistance. So nobody should misunderstand this as a day of relief or a day of any satisfaction. It is a day when people are being confronted with very difficult decisions that affect families and affect their livelihood and their circumstance, many of them for the rest of their lives. We understand that, but it's also important to say that the fishery in Newfoundland and Labrador remains a viable industry. The fishery remains an important contributor to the economy of Newfoundland and Labrador, and the fishery remains an industry of the future, not just the past, in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I want Mr. Effort to comment briefly in that regard.
Thank you, Premier. The Premier is quite right. And I want to begin my few remarks by saying that all of those people today who are on tags or just came off of tags are people who don't want to be on compensation, who want to be going back to work. And working with Mr. Tulk, Minister for Rural Development, and myself as Fisheries Minister, we're looking at the opportunities in the fishing industry of the future. The fishing industry today in Newfoundland and Labrador is very alive and vibrant and growing. I'll just take you to 1997. Last year we had an export value of $575 million. We had 21,000 people directly employed in the fishery last year. This year, with the increase in the shrimp quota, we will go over $600 million in export value, and we will have an employment numbers of about 24,000 people. We're also diversifying into many new species. And I know there's a lot of people in the province and a lot of people around don't understand the opportunities and commercial viability of these new species. And I'll just give you a couple of examples. On Bell Island, for example, since the mine closed down, there hasn't been a real job created. We have now 70 people working in a fish plant full-time, not seasonally, full-time. Red Bay, Labrador, closed since 1991. The plant is reopened with underutilized species. This fall, there will be close to 200 people. And I can give you many more examples around the province of instances like that, new species like that. But the one that I have the most confidence into is the shrimp fishery. The small boat fishermen will be, and are now today, involved in the shrimp fishery, which will create many more jobs on sea and in the fish plants. The small boats today are harvesting shrimp in Trinity Bay. The first time in the history of the province. The average daily catch, by the experiments that we've done to date, is anywhere from 1,500 to 2,500 pounds per day in a bean trawl with a small boat, very little cost getting into it. So the fishing industry is alive, well, and the opportunities are growing. People will have more opportunities, and this new program must come down today. Once we understand the full details, there will be monies for diversification, for other jobs outside of the fishery, but there will be also new opportunities by that money be able to be explored in the fishery.
Let me just conclude our opening remarks before we take questions by saying that the government of Newfoundland and Labrador is aware two, I suppose in a sense, conflicting realities. On the one hand, we confront right now as a province, and we're going to need constructive work and constructive collaboration, the biggest challenge that we've perhaps faced since Confederation. Even if you expend, as is the plan, in excess of $500 million of various forms of income assistance, license buyouts, early retirement, economic development in Newfoundland and Labrador. Nevertheless, the reality remains that nearly 20,000 people who've relied in one form or another on the Government of Canada for income support for the last 7 or 8 years are coming off that program. It's a huge number of people moving in one way or another back into an economy that, while it is beginning to grow, cannot accommodate that kind of take-up all at once. It is going to take a lot of hard work and close cooperation, and I would say a range of measures beyond those announced today in the regular program stream of measures of governments, federal and provincial, to accommodate that reality. There is not in this country today a comparable circumstance to what effectively has been announced today, the end of that income stream for that many people. Let me pick an example that perhaps those across the country might better understand. Even the impact, the combined impact of the strike which is at work today in the province of Ontario, rising out of Flint, Michigan, and the impact of that strike if it closed every car plant in Ontario, in southern Ontario, if it closed every parts manufacturer in Ontario, if every single person who directly or indirectly relied upon the auto industry were tomorrow to be out of a job, the impact, and that is a colossal impact, in Ontario would still be far smaller than the impact in economic terms of 20,000 people being displaced from an income stream in Newfoundland and Labrador. So I think we're asking for some understanding around the country of the nature of what is being announced today and why there is such strong feeling in the province of what is being announced today. What is important now is to recognize that the federal government has taken the last measure. To recognize now that we've got to make the dollars that are available work as best we can, and that we've got to try and ensure that the dollars that are available are applied as fairly as possible, and that those who are arbitrarily displaced from some of these measures are given an opportunity to participate in a reasonable fashion. That's the challenge of the provincial government. We know it's not going to be easy. We will do our best to work with all of the stakeholders involved, those who have been displaced, with the unions, with the federal government, to try and move our economy forward. That is our responsibility now, to face the challenge, to face our responsibility, to face up to the difficulties, to try and do so in a constructive, responsible way. That's the end of our opening statement. We're open to questions. We'll take questions both from the general public and from the media. We begin with some media questions and then from the general public. Tom?
Mr. Carter said his aim was to come up with a better program than you designed yourself when you were in that job. Do you think this is a better program?
I don't think today that this is an issue that, I don't think it matters at Tinker's Dam, really, about getting into a personality battle between a couple of politicians. I think this is about 19,000 people out there who are wondering what the future holds for them. And I just don't think that question is worth a response.
Is it enough? You said you would think there are measures needed beyond what's offered. So are you saying it's not enough?
I think that the federal government has to recognize that they've got a large department called HRD. They've got a range of other measures within that department program streams. They've got to find ways to target or shape some of those regular program streams to assist people. For example, we had 2,000 people just come off the TAGS program in May. Now, there's a regular program stream there, and I think there has to be a recognition that those who just came off in May, for example, are not going to be entitled to the cash out which has been proposed. So their capacity, and I think the cash out, by the way, giving people at least the chance to have some income in their hands, gives them some flexibility. But those who just came off in May don't have that flexibility. And I think we've got to identify that group, recognize them, and try and work with them through the measures which are available to the federal government. And I didn't hear this morning an acknowledgement of that or a recognition of that. Now, it may be in part because the meeting didn't go on long enough to address those questions, but those are certainly some of the questions I and ministers have in follow-up discussions with the federal government.
Yeah, you said on Monday that you were not the spokesperson for the federal government and that you would not go and sell a package that you did not approve of. Considering what you now know is in the package, will you go and sell it?
A week or so ago, we were looking at a program which was worth less than $400 million to the province of Newfoundland and Labrador. As we extrapolated, I think I've got the officials here, Andy Noseworthy and John Scott, as we extrapolated what was being presented. It looked like, what was the number, Andy? 387 million. We knew that that was not going to be nearly enough. I mean, the amounts that are here are not amounts to jump up and down about, but they are a significant improvement over where we were a few weeks ago. Obviously, if I sat here and told you we wouldn't like to have a greater measure of assistance, I wouldn't be honest with you. But this is a significant improvement, but it's going to be a very large challenge, even with this amount of money, to make this work in an effective way.
Mr. Colvin,
Sure,
I've been
go ahead.
looking at the cameras around here today, and I've been listening to you speaking about Canada and its responsibility to the people. But I think it's time to get out to the rest of Canada. The Newfoundlanders were the people who destroyed the fish stocks there. I mean, we supplemented Canada for years and years. Now it seems like everybody's getting the message out to Canada. Look at here, you're subsidising these people in Newfoundland, when actually we subsidised them with our fish stocks for the cars in Ontario and for the wheat out west and for every other product that was in Upper Canada that they could ship out. Now, even yourself as Premier of this province is making us people look like we got our hand out begging to Ottawa. And I mean, as the Premier of this province, what is your take? What is your personal take on taking the federal government to court and make them and live up to the responsibilities of people in the fishing industry? I mean, they can't come down here and look us in the face, honestly, after starving out thousands of our friends and neighbours and family, and say this is the last kick at this cat. No more coming back. They were solely and utterly, not the provincial government, the federal government were solely and utterly responsible for the fishing industry in Newfoundland, and I think it's time now they paid their price.
Well, I think that the notion that fishermen or plant workers or that communities in Newfoundland and Labrador have been, as you use your words, have been here with our hands out and that's all we've been doing is false. There was data released yesterday by Statistics Canada. I don't have the report in front of me. I don't know if one of the officials has it handy. It shows that every year since 1992, when the fishery collapsed, Newfoundland and Labrador has had out-migration. We are the only province of Canada with out-migration. And in the first quarter of this year, 1998, even though our economy has grown for the first time in many years, our GDP performance is up, and even though unemployment is down over the last 12 months, in the first quarter of this year, we had, again, a significant amount of out-migration. So the myth, and there is a myth out there, that since 1992, rural Newfoundland and Labrador in particular, people have simply been sitting at home waiting for income assistance. That is a lie. The reality is that rural Newfoundland and Labrador has very largely been depopulated. Families have left, and they're continuing to leave. So the notion that which is an easy notion to perpetrate from a long distance away, that people aren't making an effort, people haven't tried, people are simply sitting and waiting. This is false. People are leaving in record numbers. And I agree the federal government has, this is the argument we made, a responsibility because the federal government managed the fishery. And all I can tell you is that when I was there, I held that view, and I hold that view here as well. And that's one of the reasons why, earlier this week, we asked for a larger measure of support than that which was being proposed, at least at the officials' level.
Richard.
Mr. Colvin, I don't want to be here today. No more. I've already been down my fish plant. But I put 35 years in this fishery. And 35 hard years. Not like some of the probably got the same work. Too lazy to work and too lazy to live. I work with any Newfoundlander, any town, anywhere, with my skills. But today, I'm almost ready to go into the Waterford Hospital. With no education, my whole life put into fishery. And we had Mr. Anderson, and I will call him Mr. Mifflin, come down here this morning and tell me and all my fisher people, this is it. I can't read all that program, but I will get it read. The first thing I looked and read on that program, August 29th is the deadline for early retirement. I turned 55 in November. I am not about to sit down and take that with all my hard years into this fishery in Newfoundland and Labrador. I raised a family, and a good family as anyone ever raised in Newfoundland and Labrador. I got my own home, thank God for that. I got a 1978 car out there, got to do it the rest of my life. I can't sit down and take this any longer, and I think that people on Newfoundland and Labrador, along with our Premier and Mr. Tulk and Mr. Rifford, we need people speaking for us. I do believe this is a done deal. I do believe this is a done deal. If this is a done deal, and believe me, I'm Richard Clements, that's not sitting down and taking this no longer. I can't do it. My livelihood was took away. I was given 15 minutes this morning with all Newfoundlanders that say what we had to say. What bugs me, when we have those conferences, always go to the media first, instead of going to the fisher people of Newfoundland and Labrador, got this all in where they are today. Because without the fishery in Newfoundland and Labrador, Newfoundland haven't got nothing. And I'm not lying down taking no longer. I can't take it.
Other questions? Elsie.
Do you agree with this package is out, please? I'd like to know that first.
Sorry, do I do what?
Do you agree with this new package?
Elsie, I think we've got to recognize that this is the federal government's last effort, last contribution, and whether we want to agree with that.
Forget about the federal government,
No, Elsie, listen. If you want to debate me, you can debate me. If you want to talk with me, you can talk to me. But if you're asking me whether or not I recognize that this is the federal government's last effort at this, whether I want to recognize that or not, that is the reality. And I think we have to face up to that.
But here we have thousands of people's lives that have been destroyed by the collapse of the fishery, the bad mismanagement of the federal government, and all is walking away until they're 65-year-old is the buyout, the skippers. Well, that's 100 or 200 boats will not be fishing no more anyway. Then we got the early retirement, 55-year-old. Some of those people will be walking away with a pension only 65-year-old, working the fisheries 5 and 6 years. But where the main problem in rural Newfoundland and the fishing communities is really the income support. The fisher people, the people that have worked 20 and 30 years in the fishery, are between 45 years of age and early 50s. I mean, they are the crowd that turn their backs on. I mean, we should not have to leave Newfoundland. Our children is tourists. Why should we have strangers come in our own when our children is going to be strangers anyway? I mean, I really think you and your government should give it everything is in you to go back and let them know that the main people in Newfoundland, they are really turning their back on. There should be no buyout settled, no early retirement settled until the fisher people in Newfoundland have worked all their lives. I'll use an example myself. I worked 30 years in the fishery. A 51-year-old. Do you think I should walk away with just enough money to bury me after deciding I had a choice years ago? Welfare or work? I choose work. The federal government took it from me. I don't want to leave. I want to stay in the fishery, but it's not there. So because it's not there, we know why it's not there. Federal government, bad mismanagement. Now the bad mismanagement, this project, this post-tax is on the table. And then they'd say taxpayers' money, tax people's not going to do it. But sure, half the money that I'd say the tax people are getting is what the foreigners after paying. Do you agree with that or not?
Elsie, my concern, and I...
Are you going to help us people income support?
Elsie, I've been doing my best.
I know you're doing your best, but are you going to go and give it extra best now?
Do better.
Elsie, I'm going to do my best, but what I want to say to you is this. I think it would be a mistake this morning, and I hope we'll avoid it, to start saying, let's not provide for an early retirement program. Let's not provide for a licensed buyer.
No, we should not. No, we should
I don't want to misunderstand you, but I want us to be clear. I want us to be clear. If we get into a circumstance where people who've been involved in the fishery get divided against each other because they prize too small.
We're divided. We are divided now, sir.
Well, I think it's something we've got to try hard to avoid, because I can tell you, when you're dealing with the spokespersons, some of the spokespersons, you or others who were here, the requirement or the request for an early retirement program and a license buyout has been heard repeatedly and consistently, strong and clear. Now, if you're saying there needs to be adjustments, we need to look at the way in which other parts of the program be administered, I agree with you. I gave some examples. I gave some examples in my opening comments, but I don't think that we can solve the problems in one sector by saying we're going to hold up settlements in another sector.
One mistake, and I'll go on because I can go on forever. One mistake. They should have considered years in the fishery, but the only reason they never considered years in the fishery because they had too many people to take care of their lives that they destroyed.
Right on. Here's Premier Sullivan. I got a couple of questions asked. What about the 4 people that was dropped from tags, that was injured on the job or took maternity leave and this and that? What are the federal government going to do for those people?
Well, the truth is, that's one of the questions that we have raised ourselves. What happens to recent exhaustees? It's one of the comments I just made at the opening of my, in my remarks. What happens to recent exhaustees, and is there going to be, will there be measures pulled together and targeted at that group? And I gave the example of 2,000 people who came off, for example, in May. So if you're just exhausted in May and you heard an announcement in June, and you don't qualify for any of the measures, it's a bit of a startling revelation, especially if you happen to be someone. There was one gentleman this morning who was down at the press conference who's 56 years old, had 31 years in the fishery, and exhausted in May.
Well, sir,
so that means he, technically, at least, in fact, he might even be here this morning, doesn't qualify. Okay, it wasn't you. Looked just like you.
I was dropped in March month. I was dropped the 14th of March. See those glasses? Welfare glasses. And I'm not ashamed to say it. Did you get my letter from Tony Grace? My name is Bernard Stidd from Port Inn. You got it?
Yes.
Did you read the back of it? Okay, sir. Now, if the federal government does not intend to do nothing for those people that's dropped from tags, what are the provincial government going to do for us?
Well, I think we've got to recognize that the capacity of the provincial government to step in and fund huge amounts of money for a program doesn't exist. We don't have it. So we've got to work with the federal government. We are going to put up 30% of the cost.
Well, sir, I got you.
Let me finish with early retirement.
Okay.
And we are probably going to put up, once we sit down and see how we're going to administer the program, as much as 20% of the cost of the economic development funds, which is what occurred in the past. At those levels, we have exhausted all of the resources available to the provincial government. I think we all know in this room, I don't need to tell anybody here, that we're not exactly sitting with a surplus.
The media is all around me today, and you're the premier of this province. If we don't get help from the federal government, and neither do we get help from the provincial government, I guarantee you're going to have to get more establishments, you're going to have to get more fishery officers, more wildlife officers and everything. Because I have my fridge full, so help me God, if anyone comes across me, I have my fridge full of moose, salmon, fish, whatever I can get my hands on, and God up the man that comes up over my bridge.
No.
And Mr. I'm still waiting for that application from you when we start in your office about the skidoo trials. When you flew off the head like a cuckoo nest. I'm still waiting for that fucking application.
Gentleman over here.
Yes, Premier. No, I didn't get a chance to talk to you before. I mean, I heard you saying about migration and everything, and that's something I was basically going to touch on. Everyone else basically touched on everything else. I mean, basically what's moving out in Newfoundland now is our young people, right? And God knows, I mean, that's the best. I mean, once they go, I mean, there's only the rest of us left. I mean, that's all we're living for right now is for our children, our kids. I mean, it's basically everyone there. And there's no future here for our children without industry. Right now, is there any kind of project other than fishery? You're saying the fishery can't employ enough people. Is there any plans for the provincial government to have industry come in other than fishery?
Well, I think you know the areas that we're working on, and we're working as energetically as we can to move forward, for example, on the development of, I don't want to go through the long list of the Churchill River power projects, the Boise Bay plant. In fact, there were meetings recently this week in Toronto on that question. We need those economic opportunities. It's one of the reasons why I've said over and over and over again, we will not allow these large developments to take place unless there's benefits for the province. Our history is we allow big corporations to come in, to do developments, take the benefits out of the province. Precisely because we're going to have this large number of people, as I've described it, coming back into this economy, we can't afford to allow jobs to be exported. But my answer to you is, as aggressively as we can, on as many fronts as we can, we're moving to create jobs. And I would just point out to you, and let me be the first to tell you, I know it's not enough. I know it's not enough. But unemployment in the province has come down 3% in the past year. There are No, the truth is the real job numbers have increased. There are jobs being created, but they're not being created fast enough to absorb 18,000 people. Anybody who thinks that that's the case is dreaming in Technicolor. I can assure you none of us are dreaming in Technicolor. But yes, we'll aggressively be going after measures to create jobs.
One more question, Premier Tolman. I just want to ask you this now. Right now, I know, like I said, probably in town too, St. John's, they're probably suffering a lot, but out in rural Newfoundland, all our small businesses, I'm in 4 towns, I mean, I said in open line before, in 4 small communities, pretty close together, we lost 56 businesses. Right now, there's only so many businesses left. Is there any plan
Order.
in the near
Can we
future?
listen to the gentleman who's asking the question? Go ahead.
Is there any plan in the near future to help subsidize these poor business people, like with tax breaks or some kind of incentive or compensation breaks, you know, like they pay these big high, like a compensation or EI, they pay all these big dollars, and right now, I mean, they're suffering really bad. They're just barely staying alive. Is there any future plans for this government to give them some kind of tax breaks or incentive to hire on some of them young people, give them some kind of job to get a chance to move?
We do have a program, and that's Beaton to speak to it, of incentives, both, by the way, so does the federal government, for people that are creating new jobs or investing new monies or entering into new industries. I can have Beaton give you an overview of that briefly.
Well, no, sorry, I don't mean new industry. I'm talking about these small businesses right now that's already established, that are just barely living hand to mouth, who personally told me more than once, and my group, that if the people of Newfoundland don't have money to spend, they're going to the wayside like the rest of our businesses.
Yeah. Right now, no, there's no plan on the books to provide any more or any additional tax incentives. The one thing we've tried to avoid doing since 1996 is to increase taxes anywhere, and by and large we've succeeded in doing that, not to increase the level of taxation. We've said that a priority is to get the level of taxation down, including taxes on business in this province. We've got the highest tax rate in the country. We're 69% of the federal tax rate. If borrowing the most money and taxing the most were going to create prosperity, we'd be a pretty prosperous place, because we've borrowed the most and we've taxed the most. We're trying now to go the other way.
No, see, Premier, the point is that with like when you hear like Light and Power and these other big corporations, I mean, they're multi-million dollars, right? I mean, how come these little businesses got to go under? That's what I'm saying. I mean, that's my whole point. You know, there should be some kind of compensation package, because on those friends that had businesses for years and sunk thousands of dollars only to see the tears and move out of their homes, lose everything. See, Premier Tolman?
I hear what you're saying. We'll take that under consideration. We've got this lady here who's been waiting.
In the front here, and then we got a reporter at the back, and then you two. Okay.
My question
Next
is,
one.
I'm one of the fish plant workers who was laid off on May the 9th. Now, I was speaking with Mr. Mifflin, and Mr. Mifflin says that there's money there for create jobs and everything else. So the question I'm asking, is this job going to hold me into a job until I'm 65? I was well away while I worked into the fish plant. I was ready to retire at 65. I'm too old to get out into the workforce. Employers are saying, you don't have enough of years of service to give me. I'm too young for early retirement. I'm one of those people between a rock and a hard place, but I'm not lazy. I want to get out and work. Can I be assured that those grants that are, well, it's not grants, but this money is going to keep me going until I'm 65? And one question with this, too. The question that goes with this. Are those employers that Mr. Mifflin was talking about, which I mentioned to him this morning, are those employers going to turn around and lay off their regular employees to take on a tags person, which I refused 3 years ago because a woman 7 years was working there. They were going to lay him off just to take me on. That is my question for today.
Well, Mike, the answer is anybody who would tell you that there was an announcement this morning that there are funds that are going to employ you till you're 65, that never happened this morning. There was no such announcement, there was no such commitment, and there's no such a program being announced.
Will it?
No, the answer is no. But based on what I heard, I don't see anything that says to everybody who was ever in the fishery or who had exhausted that there's going to be a job for you till you're 65. That was not announced this morning. And so the answer, the straight answer, is no. What was announced this morning...
The answer is no.
Well, of course it is. Of course it is. And I think anybody who would suggest the contrary wouldn't be honest with you to sit and pretend for 1 second that that's what was announced. What was announced are funds, economic development funds, to be used to stimulate the economy. There are TJF funds for wage subsidies and that sort of thing. And I agree with you. If all we're doing is using a wage subsidy to give a job to someone who was formerly on tags and in the process displace somebody else from a job because one individual brings in a wage subsidy with them, so I'm going to hire that person now because that's cheaper for me than somebody else. That would not be a sensible program. That would be counterproductive, and I'm glad to hear you acknowledge that this morning, because that is not the answer.
Mr. Tobin, you talked about how the money for Newfoundland has increased over the last couple of weeks. Is this a sign that the finance department has lost its death grip?
I think that I'll simply say that I'm pleased that the amount of money has increased, and I would acknowledge the personal involvement of the Prime Minister in the management of this file to present something which is, I think, more compassionate and more acknowledges the size of this problem. And I'll leave it at that.
Joe.
This one from Mr. Tobin. These diversification programs that you're talking about, are they there put into place to supply jobs for the fisher people that are not affected? Or, as I got a call from a businessman, there was a meeting in Carbonear where a woman brought up that she was willing to come out and train people for professional volunteers? Is this, in my opinion, going to be another one where every Tom, Dick and Harry can stick their hand into the pot and take it out and leave nothing there for the people?
No. But to be frank with you, all the details, I have to say that while those people, while they've indicated there will be a great deal of flexibility, that we will concentrate on the communities that have been affected more so than other communities, like the Southern Shore, like Trepassey area, like Bonavista area, and so on. I think it's fair to say that all the details haven't been worked out, but I think it's also fair to say that they recognize this morning that the people that they want to concentrate on, the federal government wants to concentrate on with this program, that they want to be flexible with it, and that they want to concentrate on the people who have been affected. And to me, that means the fisher persons and the fishland workers.
So in other words, you're saying to me that when you're running this program, it's not going to be run the same as the last one, that everyone who wanted money out of this program is going to receive it, regardless of what it is for and what it's not for, as long as the money can be spent.
Let me say this to you, that first of all, we're not running this program.
You just said you were looking at
No, we're not running this program. This is a federal response to this problem. And they've indicated, I think I made that quite clear, they've indicated...
Just please, let Beaton answer, please. Go ahead.
They've indicated that they want to concentrate on the coastal communities. I think we heard phrases this morning used such as one size does not fix all, that people want to work, and that they want to concentrate on the communities of people who have been affected by the shutdown in the groundfish industry. But to say that we're running the program is not correct. At this point in time, the federal government has given some indication that it's not going to be running the same way that the COA was running and so on. But to say that we're running it is not correct. But we would ultimately, frank with you, that they do concentrate on the people most affected.
Let me just say to you. Let me just say to you that we share the view that that the program funding last round, if you look at it, did not target enough the areas most affected by the collapse of the fishery, and the program funding in future should. I think perhaps too much of the funds may have gone for good programs, may have gone for things that were perfectly justifiable, but an awful lot of it ended up in institutions, university, academic, and otherwise, in the major centers, be they Corner Brook, Gander, St. John's, or wherever, and too little of the funds ended up being used to try and diversify the economy of rural Newfoundland. Now, I just want to show a map, because we had a map done. This is the thing that we have to bear in mind, that if you start looking at the impact of the collapse of the fishery, the impact is not the same in every area. Some parts of the province have had a much larger, the area in red are the areas are hardest hit, and then the areas in brown are the next level, all the way down to the areas in white, which have the lightest impact. And this is a map that shows the effect of those who initially went into the various income support programs. So we've got to recognize, and this is why we think the zonal board concept. The boards are out there. They're made up of volunteers in the communities, not somebody in Ottawa or St. John's. Go to the local leadership and go to the local innovators and go to the local leaders and give them a chance to participate in how this money ought to be dispersed.
What we've been telling you all along that you shouldn't be doing when you're doing like this, like in the rural development associations that got all the tax money before. We said you should be coming to the people, not the community leadership and not special interest groups. This is what we've been preaching.
Well, this is what we're saying. We need to go to local community involvement.
To the people.
That's what. Just hold on a second. I'll get back to
Craig.
Ryan.
No, just okay. Craig and Ryan.
I got two questions. First off, look for a dollar value of the province's contributions this past year.
Right now, assuming a 20% or thereabouts participation in the Economic Diversification Fund, we're looking at about 20% of 70 million. It's 20% more than 70 million. And about 30% more of the cost of early retirement, which is 43 million at the moment. Now, I would just make this comment, Ryan. When you're talking about early retirement, the federal government's put out a number. The number is X. But since these are voluntary, as they've stressed this morning, voluntary programs, it seems to me that if you say we're going to spend for all of Atlantic Canada roughly, and this is the number roughly, with provincial participation, 100 million in early retirement, and after you spent the 100 million, 10 other people come in the door who are as qualified as the first group that went through the door. You can't say to the last 10 that came in the door, well, you came in the door late, so there's no program. And by the way, in discussions I have had with the Prime Minister and with ministers, there is a recognition that because these programs are license retirement, reverse auction, it's voluntary, because of the early retirement is voluntary, we're really not going to know until they get out there and test the waters what the take-up is going to be. It might be in some components that the budget which has been provided won't all be taken up. For example, license buyback. Will they really use up 187 million? Perhaps they will. Perhaps they won't. We would argue if they don't use it all up in one component, they should make the additional money available in another component. I suspect, for example, on the early retirement program, there may be greater take-up, might be, than the money that's there. If that happens, then I think additional money has to be found.
Premier, what happens...
Craig, and then the lady behind.
What happens come October this year or November when someone takes a cash out, they've spent the money, will they be allowed to qualify for social assistance, and how will that apply to the cash out?
Well, all the normal rules would apply. And in regard to social assistance, I think it goes back 60 days. But I don't think, Craig, and you're raising the question that was raised by some officials, by some federal officials who said, if we give people their money every 2 weeks for a year, same amount of money, and get a penny more or a penny less, you know, we can pay them their money that way, and then at the end of a year, they're out of money. They got no savings. They got no capacity to make any decision, kept on a subsistence level for another year, and then bang, the money ends. So, you know, we're not sure we should give them all that cash because they might spend it all. Now, let me just finish. Let me just finish. No, but just no. These are not my words. Let me just finish. But at least if you give people the income, whatever the amounts they're going to get, give them all of that money, whatever it is. Let them decide for themselves. What we've done for the last 4 or 5 years, what governments have done, is tried to decide for people what's going to happen to them. If you're really saying that at the end of 12 months it's over, then do for a fisherman or a plant worker what you would do for a civil servant in Ottawa or in Newfoundland or a private sector person. Give them a severance payment. Let them decide about their own lives. And this is why we're saying the option of a cash out is better.
Okay, the lady behind Craig.
You're doing a good job.
Mr. Tobin, my husband worked in the fishery for 32 years. A man broadside to him worked 5 years. He got the retirement package. Now, my husband don't turn 65 till July the 12th. He got cut off. Where do he fall to in this package? Anywhere or nowhere?
Right now, until we find out the detail, but based on what I can see, based on the, I'm just looking to Andy and John, based on the numbers that were put out last night, the criteria last night, he would not qualify. Is that correct? What's the cutoff date for the age 55?
Oh, so? He'd be all right.
Well, then your husband would qualify.
But he got cut off May the 9th.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Well, in that case, that's one of the issues that we've raised. We've said that we're putting in 30% of the cost of their retirement program. We want to go back and look at that. We think there's a problem. If you have somebody who got cut off in May.
So it's not all completed yet?
Well, this is one of the questions we hoped was going to be addressed this morning. Somebody was down at this morning. I don't know if the gentleman's in the room. made a very good case. The gentleman stood up and said, I've been 36 years in the fishery. I'm 56 years old. I got cut off in May. I'm not going to qualify for an early retirement. Somebody else who's worked 15 years, but who happened to qualify until August, they're going to get an early retirement. Where's the justice in that? So we think that these are issues, these are anomalies that have to be addressed. We heard the federal government say this morning they're going to consult with stakeholders. We want to take that at face value and try and work with them. You got to have some fairness in the administration of these programs.
Lady by the wall.
I got one more question, Mr. Tobin. We have a gentleman always on our demonstrations. He's not here today. He had to have lung surgery, and because he went in the hospital, he got cut off his tags because he missed so many months because of that surgery. Why was it?
I can't answer an individual case or an individual circumstance. I can invite you to
do sickness.
No, but you have to get me the information on an individual case. I just don't have the details.
If we can get that, will you look at it?
We'll certainly look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Lady by the wall, says 10 minutes you've been waiting, yes.
Yeah, good morning, or good afternoon, I think it is now. I just have 2 points I wanted to make, or wanted your opinion on. First was $8,928 is the amount of money a fish plant worker would receive if they took the cash out. And this supposedly is to help them start a new life. Well, that's according to what they get up per week.
I wasn't there this morning to hear.
So if that's to make them start a new life, have you got any suggestions as to where they could go to start this new life on less than $9,000? And the second thing that I would like to ask you is, while we're all here standing discussing the future of Newfoundland, because I believe Newfoundland is directly responsible to the fishery and the fishery to Newfoundland, how many foreign fishing fleets have been banned from our waters out there since the moratorium was called?
I have to tell you in all honesty, when I heard some people saying, let us ban whatever foreign fishing is left, and with that, we'll end the tags program, we'll all go back fishing. It's a lovely thing to say, but the truth is, if you took every pound of fish caught by so-called foreign fleets in Canadian waters, thing to say, let's say that we can stand here and say, and get everybody riled up, boy, you know, there's enough foreigners out there we could all be working. I'll tell you the truth.
Absolutely no foreign fishing whatsoever. In fact, the turbot quota that was caught last year by some chartered foreign vessels today is assigned to all Canadian. The redfish quota that Japan has is assigned to Newfoundland fishing boats. And as of yesterday, there were 7 boats outside the 200-mile limit, where 5 years ago,
there were 59 or 65.
60, 80 boats out there. So there is no inside, and there is minimum outside. But still, the Premier is quite right. If the fish that was assigned, that's now being Canadianized, was was given to the Newfoundland boats or the plants, it addressed 200 or 300 jobs.
I agree with some of what you're saying, but then most of these people in this room are inshore, small-boat fisher people. They did not
Newfoundland
destroy
Premier
our
Brian
fishery.
Tobin, his Fisheries Minister John Efford, meeting with people in the Confederation Building, the provincial legislature, as they talk about the federal plan to extend more aid to Newfoundland, but the last time the federal government says we'll be able to help people displaced by the ground fishery collapse. Stay with us, we'll have more when we come back right after this short break.
Welcome back to the Sunday edition. I'm Patrick Conlon. That aid package announced Friday by Ottawa was good news and bad news for Atlantic fish workers. Good news because the feds, they say, have committed $730 million to help them net new jobs. Bad news because many of those people will likely be forced out of homes and villages their families have occupied for generations. Has Ottawa abandoned Atlantic fish workers? A yes and a no in response to that question later on in the program. But first, Lawrence Kiley's family has been fishing off Newfoundland since 1760. He joins me now. Welcome to the program, Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, sir.
Critics of the deal, critics of the way Ottawa has stick-handled this one since the moratorium was declared in 1992, now look at people like you, Mr. Kiley, and say, what's wrong with you? Have you been waiting for the fish to come back? How do you respond to that?
We've been waiting for the fish to come back, but the first in-car package it was put on when the fishery was closed all of a sudden. But the second package, tags, the federal government should have took the responsibility then to restructure the fishery and take care of the people and downsize the fishery and do their best to streamline the fishery so as to be economically viable. But they didn't do that. This was a sham from day one.
Well, now, are you talking about the second phase of the program, 1994, the TAGS program?
Yes, the TAGS program. Well, I mean, the federal government knew then, the scientists knew then that the fish was even in decline at that time. Even though there was a moratorium on it, there was still a decline in the fishery. So they knew then that they should streamline the fishery, buy out fishermen, retire fishermen or plant workers, but it hasn't been done. And now we come to a stage 2 years after, 3 years after, we're still in the mess we're in. We'll always be in a mess if the federal government don't restructure the fishery. And this package that we got now is designed to restructure the fishery, and if that can be done, well and good. But is the money there to do that? That's the problem here in Newfoundland.
Well, but let's talk about you, Mr. Kiley. Let's talk about you and a family that have been fishermen since 1760, 250 years.
That's
Damn
true.
close to it, anyway.
That's true.
What have you been doing for the last 6 years? How have you been living? How have you been surviving?
We have been surviving from check to check, and my wife, she went to school and she's retraining. She had a federal government job and her job became redundant and she went to school and I stay home and look after the house. And I'm involved heavily in volunteer work. I've joined the Knights of Columbus, I've joined many organizations that volunteer work. I keep myself busy. But it's downheartening, it's sad that we as fishermen for 250 years were brought to this brink, by a federal government that Department of Fisheries that didn't realize or had no control or had no scientific information after 50 years what was happening in this province. It's very sad.
Now, there will likely be an offer on the table to buy back your license, right?
Yes, yes.
And what do you figure that'll go for? About 100,000?
If it go for 100,000, if the package comes out and the HRD comes out and he says we'll offer you $100,000 for your license, there's an awful lot of questions have to be answered. Is this tax free? Is this debt free? If, for example, if they offer me $100,000, I have to pay $30,000 or $40,000 right off the top for income tax. I owe the Fisheries Loan Board. I bought a new boat in June. In June of '92, they closed down the fishery in July of '92.
You didn't see it coming, eh? Sorry to interrupt. You didn't see it coming. You bought about 1 month before.
That's right.
The moratorium was imposed.
Yes, that's true. No, I bought her. I had her ordered in January of that year. They closed down the deep sea fishery in January, and they should have then closed down the inshore fishery at the same time. They made a boo-boo there. They should have closed it all down to one time. And I would have been spared the expense of investing in a new boat. But they didn't do that. And my boat came and I was geared up to still continuing the fishery. I had no other choice. I'm 56 years old. Where am I going?
And you've got a 10-year-old in school, still in school.
And I got a 10-year-old in school.
But on the other hand, do you have to face the possibility, like many of your neighbors, of picking up and leaving Newfoundland?
I wouldn't dream of leaving Newfoundland. My family was here 250 years. We've been down that road. We've been on the mainland. I've worked on the mainland in the early 60s for 3 years, and that's a rat race up there. It's a lovely place to work, but it's a hell of a place to live, to bring up children. I'd sooner be home here on a meal a day. It's very difficult.
Do you face the possibility of going on welfare then?
No, I will not go on welfare.
But how are you going to survive, Mr. Kiley?
Well, this license buyout that they're talking about, that should, the federal government is foolish if they think they're going to get people out of the fishery for $100,000 with all these other things, taxes and down and Fisheries Loan Board and all this. It's impossible to do. What they got to come to me, sit down with each individual fisherman who wants to sell their license and talk to them and see what's there for them. What can carry them till they're 65. That's the only way it can be done. or if not, you're going to have the same problem year after year after year. Thousands of fishermen not making a living at the fishery, just scraping along and different things. You know, we have a crab fishery here now, and
any hope there?
There is hope there. I see a bright future there for the crab fishery, but if the fishery is restructured. This is the way you restructure the fishery. You downsize the fishery. You take, say, for example, in my community, there's 20 groundfish licenses. You take 10 of these, you buy 10 of these out, how much money it costs, but you buy them out. And then the other 10 fishermen that's left, other 10 groundfish licenses that are left there, they'll be able to make a living at this. But the way this works now, a little bit of fish that we're getting, nobody's making a living. But you've got to restructure the fishery.
Do you fear you face the possibility you're going to be the last generation of Kielys to fish off Newfoundland?
Yes. Oh yes, I dread that. I have 2 boys, and I must say I'm very thankful that, you know, they're working, and the daughter's working, and I'm delighted that they're working, but I wouldn't want them to go into the fishery now, because the future's not very bright for a young person to get in having a heavy investment in. I got to get out of this somehow debt-free.
Okay.
You know, the provincial government plays a role in this in the meantime.
All right, sir. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Lawrence Kiely, his family has fished off Newfoundland since 1760, and he may be the last of the Kiely fishermen. Stay with us. Has Ottawa abandoned Atlantic fish workers? 2 very different answers to that question when On the Line continues.
Oh, yes, sir. Like a sand bear. Yeah.
You can't even see the phone.
duck over there.
Where to?
It's a goal, is it?
That's a goal.
Is this your idea of rule of law?
No, it's legal, honest.
Oh, no, it isn't. Come on, Lowell, you know that.
Director, you haven't a clue about the stakes we're dealing with here, do you?
Apparently I do. And better than you.
Oh, you just forgot that a lot of guys just got shot up in the Ukraine. Or that linebacker may do even worse when they board Alpha.
That's combat. That's different.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure the dead appreciate the fine distinctions.
You know, you really surprised me, Lowell. For a guy who knows so much about the law, you have a really twisted sense of right and wrong.
Right and wrong? Right and wrong? Listen, Mr. Political Appointee, holier-than-thou director, government is not about right and wrong. Government is about power. The United States of America is about power. Since 1776, we've been saying, don't tread on me. Why? For one reason. Because when somebody does, bang, they get a bloody nose and a one-way ticket to a war crimes trial. Am I wrong? Oh, please, somebody tell me I'm wrong.
Grief. You're not wrong, Lowell. You're just out of line.
Way out.
Are you finished?
Yeah, I'm finished.
Good. The subject is closed.
No, it isn't. Phil, show the director what happens if the warheads reach Israel.
Oh,
hey, Solo got a little out of line.
Show him. Show him what happens if we fail.
Global 94, Gideon variation.
Gideon?
Biblical general who defeated the Midianites.
When I blow with the trumpet, say the sword of the Lord and Gideon.
Ready with film, sir.
Room lights.
Gideon's scenario assumes radicals transport a medium-yield special weapon to an Israeli population center, say Tel Aviv, and detonate it. Israelis retaliate. Strike Damascus, Amman, Baghdad, Cairo. The Arab world responds. Syrian armor on the Golan, Egyptian in the Sinai. Their bombers blanket Israeli cities with biological and chemical weapons. After that, havoc.
Three days later, Arab and Israeli ground forces fight to a stalemate. Again.
History books record 4 million civilians die. But not 1 inch of land in the Mideast